Good morning, race fans. What an amazing weekend of races. We had the trucks and Indy at St. Petersburg, and then we had O'Reilly and Cup at COTA. And frankly, I think the trucks race at St. Petersburg was the best race of the weekend, kind of edging out the COTA races. I'm not a huge Indy guy, but I did like watching Alex Palou basically come from fourth to the lead and kind of show how good he is. But overall, again, I'm going to say I think the trucks race was the best race this weekend. And then O'Reilly and Cup were pretty on par with each other. And Indy was just kind of neat to watch because, as I said, I'm not a huge Indy follower. I'm still kind of getting into it a little bit, but watching Alex Palou, Erickson, McLaughlin, Lundgaard, and a few others was pretty neat because there's just something about Alex Palou and how good he is that is just fun to watch somebody really execute. So overall, I am going to repeat myself again. Trucks kind of won the weekend in my mind, but it was a weekend of great racing, but it was a lot of single file racing. I prefer a little more action. I prefer a little more door to door racing. I like the drafting tracks where you have two lines competing against each other. I like more passing than single file racing allows. And so while again, I think like all the races were pretty solid. Um, my scoring, I scored. Yeah, let me get. Oh, where'd it go? I scored the Cup race a 78. It was almost a 76, but because of kind of some late action, Connor Zillage moving forward, making a lot of gains, kind of making up territory, getting into the top four. SVG making up territory, getting into second position. But overall, I think the design of Circuit of the Americas, it's an F1 track. It is basically designed for single file racing. And while some people enjoy that, I find it a little boring. And I like the more action. I like when just timing your pit isn't the only strategy that's happening in a day. Yes, we had decent tire fall off, roughly 4 seconds, but overall, eh, it was okay. And congratulations to Tyler Reddick. He's done something nobody else has ever done. And I find myself just going like, "Wow, congratulations! You're a really good driver," but he doesn't get me excited. And so while again, historic feat, congratulations, well done. I'm underwhelmed. And I feel that it's unfair to Tyler Reddick because he did something amazing, and he definitely showed that his car was the fastest all weekend. We know that when you look at how SVG qualified, he started in row 7, P13, and if you listen to the radio, his complaints the entire day were lack of rear grip, lack of acceleration, and just no speed. And you could see that when he caught up to Reddick and he just couldn't close the gap. He couldn't get there no matter what he did. And you saw it in the straights specifically. When you'd come around and then you just had that long straightaway, Reddick would just gain ground. And then SVG would close the gap again, but then get back to a straight and he would just gain ground until SVG finally came over the radio and said, "My tires are smoked." So he was talking about no lateral grip, no real turning. And I do think that really impacted the overall quality of the race. Plus, it was a hot day. We had a couple drivers have some heat issues, potentially heat stroke. We know Allmendinger, I think, was taken to emergency after getting out of his vehicle and collapsing. We know Alex Bowman actually got a replacement driver who was on the TV crew as the spotter for Katie there, Kate, I forget her name. And I thought it was kind of wild to, hey, you, come on, you're gonna drive a cup car today. So that was pretty cool. But let's get into some of. I got too many windows open here on this computer, so let's start with Craftsman Trucks. I want to just kind of go. Riggs had a phenomenal weekend. Started 28th, worked his way up there, and this is why I thought the trucks race was more interesting. A lot more passing, a lot more competitive. The truck drivers were even saying this was one of the best tracks they've run. A lot of fun, a lot of speed, and there were a lot of places where you could pass, and it wasn't strictly single file racing, which to me, single file racing is basically how well did you qualify and are you able to make up ground, and pass people during the day? Trucks had some good passing, had a lot of good action. And yeah, there were moments like this where you were kind of single file, but because of the way the track was laid out, you got good passing zones, you got good restarts and some chaos. And I think that added to the overall quality of the race. And how did I score it? I scored trucks an 80. So I put passing was an 8, tires baseline 7, strategy was an 8, racing quality was actually a 9 because I really felt, especially those leaders with Riggs and a couple other drivers there, that was a lot of fun. Watching Riggs kind of take over, and then everybody, it was just, there was a lot of a chess match happening. So I do think that of the NASCAR series, the trucks won the weekend with the most interesting, and I put the enjoyment at an 8. Um, did I? Here, let me show you. Where did my Excel sheet go? Yeah, I'm gonna show you. So yeah, this is how I grade things. I've got my own little system here that I made, and I think it does a pretty good job of covering everything you need to cover. So you can see uh, right now, Daytona Trucks race is my highest scored race of the season for all NASCAR. I thought that Daytona Trucks race is the only 10 I've given out, and that was 10 for enjoyment because that was such a fun race, so much action, so many storylines, and overall really good racing quality. So, um, but yeah, you can see how on my metric here. But yeah, this one, St. Petersburg, I just scored it an 80. That's in line with, I'm going to go to the O'Reilly. O'Reilly, I put at a 78. But Atlanta, I put the O'Reilly series at an 80. Same thing with Daytona, I put it at an 80. So, a little bit of variation in how we got there. I thought, at Atlanta for O'Reilly, the passing was the best feature of that race, so I gave it a 9. But with Daytona, I gave the enjoyment a 9 on the O'Reilly race because I thought that was a lot of fun. That was a really good race. Not as much fun as the truck race, but still a lot of fun. And then I'll show you my cup scores here. So, I got this shrunk down a bit. So there. And yeah, I scored this 8 in enjoyment. It would have been a 7 except for toward the end of stage 3. I thought stage 3 was the best stage of the race. We had a lot more movement, especially with Connor Zilisch. Now, Connor Zilisch got wiped out a couple times, worked his way back up to 4th, and then coming around turn 1, he was at the wrong end of an accordion. He had, 3 cars run into him and he got kind of hit by Zane Smith and spun out. He ended up finishing 14th. But if that hadn't happened, if he had somehow made that corner, I think we would have seen a really interesting push by Connor Zilisch to make it up to where SVG was and potentially challenge Reddick because Zilisch had a fast car too. SVG was complaining about his car all day. We know he didn't qualify well. He was fighting his vehicle the whole weekend. And, as I explained earlier, just massive issues getting grip and speed out of his vehicle. But if you look at Zilisch, he had some speed. He made up a lot of ground and a lot of territory. If he had gotten up so he was running neck and neck with SVG, we could have probably seen Zilisch make a run to try to overtake Reddick there. And I think that would have been really cool. Would have been really interesting. But it didn't happen. It just he got spun out. So what can I say? I have not input the individual scores for the drivers for Cup yet, so I'm not going to get into that today. I mainly want to cover the highlights. So overall, I thought St. Pete's was a great, or St. Petersburg, however you want to say it. St. Petersburg was a phenomenal race. I'd like to see O'Reilly and Cup go there and run this track and see how it plays out, because I do think it'll be more similar to a Chicago or maybe the San Diego race coming up this year, where you get, yeah, it's a road course, but there are more passing zones. There's a little more chaos because you're doing things like right angles, or it just allows for a little bit more passing than COTA did. And I think COTA, because it's an F1 track, I think it basically forces everybody into single file except for at certain key passing places. And to me, that's just not nearly as exciting as super speedways, the intermediates, or the short tracks, where you have so many different storylines. You have, and ways that the race happens. There's just way more action, and I just like the ovals a lot more than the road courses. Well, I did like Sonoma last year, but I feel like Sonoma and Watkins Glen, you have a little bit more of, yeah, you get single file sometimes, but you have more zones where you have two lines going competing, and then they have to merge back together. So I don't know. I think it was interesting. It was a good race overall, but Riggs was the story. Showed a lot of speed, a lot of poise, and came from the absolute back of the pack to the front to win it. Definitely worth watching if you didn't watch it. Great race. But let's go over and show a little bit of Indy. Again, I'm not a huge Indy guy. I'm not into the open wheel racing as much. I like the door to door action, as I've said multiple times in this video already. But Alex Palou is definitely a talent, and he didn't qualify as well. And basically, and this is, you saw that overhead right there, just like the trucks race or any sort of road race in NASCAR. You start too wide, but as soon as you get to that first corner, you end up getting into the single wide, and you get a couple places where you get the two wide again, but then it goes back to single wide, and it's that boring single wide, single track racing to me is, it goes back to that Monaco race and that F1 did several years back, where there was basically one pass the entire race, and it wasn't one of the top 10 cars. So basically, if you qualified first, you knew you were going to win the race, and that's boring. I want more competitiveness. I want more passing, tire degradation, real strategy, not just when you pit, when you don't pit. I need to make this move now. I need to, work with this other guy or this row of cars. There's stuff that happens in oval tracks at all levels that is different than a road course, that just adds to the quality of racing in my mind. That three wide there was wild, but then you get this car stacking up on the back of another car, and I believe this was a Schumacher's nephew or something, and he was out of the race at the first turn, so that sucks for him. But you know, the Indy race was, again, cool vehicles, technical great drivers. I'm just not as enthused by this style of racing, but I think I'm going to be watching a little bit more Indy this year, just because I do find Alex Palou's storyline rather interesting. So, but let's move on from that. I just wanted to give you a little taste of Indy. Definitely think the St. Petersburg track is worth maybe bringing Cup and O'Reilly series to, maybe next year, maybe the year after that. Who knows? I'm not involved in NASCAR. I'm just a fan. So what can I say? And then we got O'Reilly's. Now, I'm with Kevin Harvick. I do think we should refer to the second tier of NASCAR as the Grand National Series. I'm going to try to catch myself instead of just saying O'Reilly's, because I think we got caught in that just calling it Xfinity for a decade. And now we get that mental catch of going, oh, Xfinity, no, O'Reilly's. And no, let's call it the Grand National Series so we have an identifier. We know Cup is Cup no matter who sponsors the entire series. So why don't we say we got Cup level, then Grand National level, then truck level, then ARCA? I think that works, and it kind of identifies the level of competition in racing and the type of vehicles we're dealing with. So the O'Reilly Auto Parts Grand National Series, how about that? Because I do think calling it the NOAPS or NOPES is a weird acronym, and they probably should have thought of that. So NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Grand National Series, or O'Reilly Grand National Series. I don't know. I'm repeating myself here, but overall, great race. SVG had some car issues that he had to overcome. He started, a little further back in the field, worked his way forward. He even talked about how he was testing different lines, kind of getting his car dialed in, getting some reps on the track, because he said specifically his cup car was not driving well, was not behaving well, and he himself was not driving well. And then right now we got SVG and Zilich running 1-2. Zilich makes the pass. Zilich was looking good. Zilich's car looked really fast, but he ended up falling to the back because of a brake rotor issue. At one point, I commented that the tire changer was up in the back right wheel well, like just way up in there during a pit stop. And then I think a lap or two later, we end up seeing Zilich back in the pits, and they're talking about the left rear rotor being damaged. And they had to swap out the entire left rear rotor assembly. They did that and got him back into the race. But, overall, his SVG show at the O'Reilly series showed that he could win um, at COTA, but I do think that the storyline for COTA is that SVG's car was not what it needed to be to compete with Tyler Reddick's car, the 2311 vehicle, which was showing top speed, and you could see it in the straightaways when Tyler Reddick was just pulling away from SVG, and I guarantee SVG had that gas pedal matted to the floor, right? He was not holding back. He just didn't have the speed to keep up with 2311's 45 cars. So, again, props to Tyler Reddick. Dude's a great driver. I just, what can I say? He's just not super exciting for me. Historic feat, absolutely, but he maybe it's just that he was fairly quiet last year, and so he kind of, in my mind, maybe he faded a little bit as far as like the how much I care about how he performs. And so yeah, he did great this year. He's a great driver, but all right, let's get the cup. I'm taking too long here. I'm just repeating myself over and over again. So all right, Circuit of the Americas, interesting F1 track. I think we had a couple storylines. Is definitely the heat. Definitely like a lot of cars not being able to keep up. But Reddick's car was definitely fast. He started on the pole. SVG started, row 7, P13, had to work his way forward, ended up getting stage points in stage 1. Uh, and I think he did that because he needs points. So it's one of those, like, you could tell who was pitting for long-term strategy and who was pitting just to get, hey, I need stage points because this is a point, all I'm doing is trying to make sure I don't fall further behind in points. Like Carson Hocevar admitted that he is not good on road courses before this race even started. This was last week. And so he, took the 2 points. He placed ninth in the first stage, but then he faded toward the back, ended up having a spin toward the end, and there he is on screen. He had a decent start to the race, but just over time, he just got passed and ended up being in the, I think he finished like 31st or something. So rough day for Carson. But, one of the things that I did, and I want to say I accurately predicted, this is me touting my own horn. Obviously, I don't have anybody that I can tell about it. This was me just, mentally noting that I think Blaney is going to be the one that's going to push this and maybe the surprise winner. Blaney was there all day long, was led for a little while. I think it was 11 laps, but then he was stalking Reddick in second place for a long time. And he would always close the gap and get almost there. At one point, he almost passed Reddick, but he just didn't have the raw speed that Reddick did, so he couldn't complete the pass. And that was the story over and over again until Blaney's tires started falling off and he faded a bit. So again, there were so many great storylines, but I didn't feel like this race was super exciting. Not a ton of passing, a lot of single file racing, kind of some when do they pit, and again, and this is where, based on my metrics, you could have um like good racing quality, because I do feel like overall the racing was pretty good. It was above average. There was good strategy. There was, you know, the tire degradation. You had about 4 seconds of drop off from new tires to old tires, and that was really a big factor. At one point, McDowell decided to stay out and gamble, and he was about a quarter of the track ahead of the actual, guys with new tires. And for a while, he was in a really interesting position that if that gamble had worked, it would have been like his gamble at Daytona. And so I got to applaud Michael McDowell, like bold strategy, being counterintuitive, going counter to what everybody else was. But that late caution just kind of screwed him there, because then he ended up was forced to pit because it's like, okay, if we're gonna have a restart, I need new tires. I can't make that gamble that, hey, I'm a quarter of a track ahead of these guys. If I can just keep pace for a while, I can probably run these laps out and be toward the front. That would have been a really cool strategy if it had worked, but that late caution kind of screwed that strategy. But see here on my scoring, I've got passing as a 7. It's basically, it was standard road course passing. You had some passing, but nowhere near the 57, lead changes that happened at Atlanta. Atlanta was an awesome race, and you can see that reflected here in my 86 score from last week. So I gave enjoyment and race quality a 9, as well as passing a 9 for Atlanta. And I think I'm trying to create a system that is trying to be objective for about 80% and then subjective for, enjoyment, because sometimes you can have an objectively bad tire situation like Bristol last year, but you can have a lot of enjoyment because it was a fun race because of the chaos that bad tire kind of elicited in the racing. So just one of those where I do feel that there's a lot of good racing this weekend. um, but like Zilich was just, God, he was just a pinball for a while. He was just frequently in a bad spot where he got sidewiped by somebody and spun out, or toward the end when he was making his way, he did the restart, he was fourth, but because of the way that the field spread out and so many cars there, he was the end of like a 4-car pileup that caused him to spin into the gravel and the grass there, and then he only finished 14th. But if he had come around that corner and not been at the end of that accordion, as I said earlier, I think he would have been viable for competing with Reddick and SVG at the end. But what can I say? He got spun out. But here you can see right here, Reddick is just pulling away from Blaney when they should be at least keeping pace with each other there, because they're both accelerating out of that turn. But over and over again, you saw Reddick, both cars in a straight line, either SVG or Blaney or whoever, Reddick would just gain ground in that straightaway to the top of the hill. And then you turn the corner and whoever was in second place would start catching up. But it was always that sort of yo yo effect where he kept closing the gap, closing the gap. But because Reddick had so much speed, you couldn't overtake him. So, congratulations to Tyler Reddick. Um, Great driver, historic start to the season. Um, I've just never had him on my list of like, woohoo, he's a guy I'm cheering for. Not that I like proactively cheer for an individual driver. As I've said many times, I've got like 20 different drivers that I find interesting and there's an interesting storyline about. Maybe I just don't know enough about Tyler Reddick. Maybe I just need to do a little more digging to find that, because I really do like Denny Hamlin and I love Michael Jordan because he's Michael freaking Jordan. I like the idea of 2311, but I've just never been super wowed by Reddick or Wallace. They're just sort of like, yeah, they're there. And maybe this is me being too honest with you, but yeah, I've got probably 20 drivers that I find really interesting. And then there are other drivers like William Byron. He's a great freaking driver, and he just, again, he's just one of those drivers like, yeah, you're really good, but I have no real feelings like pro or against. Reddick, no real feelings pro or against. I'm just sort of like, yeah, you're there. You're a good driver. Okay. And maybe I should be more excited for Reddick or more excited for um, Byron, but I don't know. And I'm trying to be brutally honest with you that there are certain drivers like I really enjoy watching SVG because he is a true master at his craft doing something interesting. Maybe I need to look at Reddick as he's a really technical driver and that's what he, so he's very interesting in that respect, but he has zero personality. So I don't know. I like Carson Hocevar for his speed and aggression. Yeah, he makes some stupid mistakes, but overall speed and aggression. I like Suarez because he's interesting and he does drive with his elbows out. So like everybody, I got a little bit of a different why I like to follow them. Kyle Busch, kind of a kind of a very rough exterior. Let me put it that way, but the dude can drive. And if you've been, watching the sport long enough, he can drive pretty much anything. So him being on this extended dry spell is really weird. Um, maybe it's just because I'm a Dale Earnhardt Sr. fan. Always have been. Rusty Wallace, Michael Waltrip, Darrell Waltrip. I like those old guys who kind of mixed it up. I love Dale Jr. too. Like, uh, you know, Jeff Gordon. Like, how can you go wrong with Jeff Gordon? Uh, I know I even like Logano and Blaney. They each have interesting storylines, but there are a couple drivers that I'm just sort of completely indifferent to. No, no positive or negative. It's just like, yeah, you're there, and I don't mean that to be a negative on them. That's just me not getting it, or there's something that I'm just not understanding, like what their appeal is. And I again, not on them. That's on me, but hey, we're all like allowed to kind of follow the drivers that we find interesting or like. And as I said, I got like 20 drivers. I tried to list them all the other day, and I just like ended up listing like half the field. So yeah, what can I say? Like, big fan of Ryan Preece. Why? Because he's a hard-nosed racer and good on short tracks, and all of a sudden, he's not there, and then he's there. So Denny Hamlin last year in the Phoenix race, 100% cheering for him to get his championship. But do I consider myself a Denny Hamlin bro or fan? Like, no. If he's running well, I'll be like, yeah, that's great. He's doing really well. So maybe I evaluate on the fly who I'm like, this is the best racer today. But sometimes the best racer that day just doesn't do anything for me, and I'm just sort of like, okay. And it's an intellectual, like, yeah, you're really good. You did a great job. Christopher Bell. I really like Christopher Bell, and he used to be in that category of I'm fairly indifferent to. But he's grown on me. So maybe Reddick will grow on me. Maybe Wallace and Byron and a couple of these others will grow on me. Um, but as I said, there's probably half the field that I kind of quasi cheer for and whatnot. So I don't know. That's just me. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, and I know this has been a bit of a rambling all over the place video, but I watched a lot of racing this weekend, and none of it really jumped out at me as truly extraordinary. Um, but really good all the way around. Lots. I think both O'Reilly and Cup I put at a 78. So solid, above average, good race, but not great, not exceptional, and definitely not a top quality like a 90 or above. So overall, very solid, above average, 78%. Gave trucks, I think, what did I say, an 80? Yeah, trucks I gave an 80. And overall, great racing weekend. And I look forward to Phoenix next week. So, all right, talk to you soon. Have a great afternoon.